Welcome to Life Stories, where the people you judge too quickly are often the ones who teach you the biggest lessons. What if the woman everyone thought was a gold digger turned out to have more power than the entire room combined? What if love wasn't enough, not because she didn't feel it, but because he didn't fight for it? This is a story about humiliation dressed in diamonds, silence that cut deeper than insults, and a woman who walked into a world that never expected her to stand tall and left it shaking. It's raw, it's painful, and somewhere in it, you just might see a version of yourself. Let's go back to the night everything changed. They called me a gold digger at my own engagement party. That should have been the worst part. It wasn't. The worst part was watching the man I loved stand in the same room while they tore me apart and do absolutely nothing. My name's Emily Rise. I'm a third-grade teacher from a working-class neighborhood in Brooklyn. I pay my own bills, love my job, and believe every child deserves to feel seen. That's all I ever wanted to be, someone who mattered in quiet, lasting ways. But that night, surrounded by champagne flutes and hand-stitched suits in a glass-walled mansion in the Hamptons, I realized the world I'd stepped into didn't believe in that kind of worth. I met Carter Whitmore 6 months ago at a cafe in downtown Manhattan. He spilled coffee on my lesson plans and offered to buy me a new drink, and something about his awkward charm and disarming smile made me stay long after the coffee was gone. He listened like no one else had before. He didn't flinch when I told him I was a teacher or that I still owed student loans. He told me he worked in finance but didn't talk about numbers. He talked about people, and I believed him. What I didn't realize until much later was that Carter didn't just work in finance. He was the heir to one of the most powerful investment firms in New York. His family had generations of money and the kind of influence that didn't show up in magazines. It showed up in boardrooms and Senate fundraisers. But Carter never flaunted it. In fact, he seemed to run from it. When he proposed to me, quietly, tenderly, at the same cafe where we met, I thought I had everything. I thought we had something real. And then came the party. His mother, Evelyn Whitmore, met me at the door with a smile so polished it could cut glass. Her tone was warm, her words were practiced, but her eyes were all calculation. Carter's sister, Blair, didn't bother pretending. She looked me over like I was a substitute handbag her brother had picked up off the clearance rack. They called me the teacher with a kind of amused horror, like I'd said I cleaned toilets for a living. The women their age, daughters of senators, CEOs, old family names, drifted by in $6,000 gowns and polite venom. I tried to hold my head high. I answered questions about my work, about my parents, about my school, questions that always ended with some version of how quaint. I smiled too much, drank too little, and watched Carter from across the room as he floated effortlessly through his world. He didn't notice that I was drowning. It wasn't until I stood near the fireplace, hoping for just a sliver of warmth, that I heard them. Blair and her friends. Their laughter was sharp, their words sharper. "She probably thinks she's going to change the world with crayons and gold stars," one of them said. "You have to give Carter credit. He always did have a thing for stray puppies." I should have walked away. I should have said nothing. Instead, I spoke. "I teach third grade," I said, startling them into silence. "And yeah, I do think it matters. I think helping kids learn to read, to question, to think, that's the beginning of changing everything." Blair blinked. "Oh, Emily, don't be so sensitive. You've spent the night mocking everything about me," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "My job, my family, my life, and Carter, he hasn't even noticed." That silence was louder than any insult. Even Evelyn looked up from her conversation across the room. I turned, heart hammering, ready to leave, ready to disappear. And then my phone buzzed. "Jackson, you okay? Want me to come?" "I'm in the city." I stared at the message. My brother. I hadn't told Carter's family about Jackson. Not really. They assumed he was some warehouse supervisor or blue-collar tech support guy. I let them assume, because I wanted to be enough on my own. But Jackson wasn't a warehouse guy. He was the founder and CEO of Reyes Innovations, a tech empire that made headlines when it turned down a $40 billion buyout. He was one of the youngest billionaires in the country. But more than that, He was my brother. The guy who stayed up tutoring me in math when I nearly failed high school. The guy who worked 2 jobs to help cover my college tuition. And the guy who taught me, no matter how much money he made, never to let people treat me like I was less. I typed back, "Come now, please." He didn't hesitate. 20 minutes later, I saw the black SUVs roll into the driveway. At first, people thought it was security for some new arrival. But then he stepped out, tall, commanding, dressed in a dark suit that cost more than my rent. He walked straight toward me. He didn't care who was watching, didn't care that the room behind the glass had gone still. "Hey, little sis," he said, hugging me tightly. "Who do I need to talk to?" The doors opened behind me. Evelyn's breath caught. Carter's uncle actually choked on his whiskey. A guest whispered, "Is that Jackson Ray's?" And panic spread like spilled wine. Carter emerged from the crowd, eyes wide with confusion. "Emily?" I didn't know. I looked at him then, really looked. And in that moment, I knew what he was sorry for. He was sorry he hadn't known I came with power. Not sorry he let me be humiliated. Not sorry he stood silent. That's when I realized I was never the gold digger. They were. What do you do when the man you love stands by while others tear you down? Would you stay quiet, or would you finally speak the truth, no matter who it destroys? The next 5 minutes would change everything. And the woman they tried to bury was just about to rise. The air inside the Whitmore estate had changed. The laughter was gone, replaced by the kind of silence that stretches between heartbeats when something irreversible is about to happen. Jackson stood beside me, a living contradiction in their world of old money, young, self-made, and utterly unbothered by their legacy. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about Carter. He stood in the center of the room like a man realizing the house he built wasn't fireproof. His eyes darted between faces, his mother's pale shock, Blair's crumbling poise, Jackson's unreadable calm. And then they landed on me. That's when I saw it. Not love, not regret, but fear. Fear that everything they thought I was, insignificant, disposable, had just been disproven in front of everyone that mattered to them. Jackson's voice broke through the tension, quiet but cutting. "I understand there's been some confusion tonight about my sister's value." His words hit like steel wrapped in velvet. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. He looked at Evelyn, whose diamond necklace suddenly looked like a noose. "Perhaps you all made assumptions. That's common. What's less common is the willingness to admit those assumptions were wrong." Carter cleared his throat, trying to recover. "Emily, I didn't know. If I had." I turned to him slowly. "If you had known, what? That my brother was rich? That I came with a pedigree after all?" My voice shook, not from weakness, but from the years of being polite, being small, being quiet to make others comfortable. "Would that have made me worthy in your eyes, or just easier to explain to your country club?" His mouth opened, but no words came out. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice soft, polished, rehearsed. "Emily, let's not let tonight get away from us. We've clearly had a misunderstanding. No one intended to hurt you." That was the moment the memory hit me like a cold wave. Her in the powder room hours earlier, lipstick in hand, telling me with a smile that I didn't belong here. That love wasn't enough. That I was drowning in a world I couldn't possibly survive. And now that she saw the headlines forming, the power shifting, she wanted grace, forgiveness, reversal. I looked around the room. These people didn't regret what they'd said. They regretted who I turned out to be, and that was a different kind of cruelty. "I didn't come here tonight to prove anything," I said slowly. "I didn't even want anyone to know about Jackson. I wanted to walk into this family as myself, a teacher from Brooklyn. I thought that would be enough." Carter stepped toward me, desperate. "You are enough. I swear, Emily, I love you." I stared at him, and for the first time, I saw the difference between love that protects and love that pleads. "Then where were you, Carter?" I asked. "When your sister laughed at me, when your mother cornered me and told me I wasn't built for this life, where were you?" His lips parted, but silence answered me again. "You told me I belonged here," I whispered. "But you meant as long as I played along, as long as I stayed quiet, smiled politely, and didn't challenge your family's cruelty. You didn't love me. You loved the version of me that made things easy for you. Something shifted in his eyes then, a flicker of realization, maybe even shame. But it was too late. Then Jackson did something I wasn't prepared for. He stepped back, letting me stand alone, with every gaze on me as if to say, "This is your moment. Take it." And I did. "I'm not ashamed of where I come from," I said louder now. "I'm proud to be a teacher. I'm proud of my parents, of every child I've helped, of every late night spent lesson planning in my tiny apartment. I don't need a penthouse view to know my worth. And I don't need your validation to stand tall." I turned to Evelyn. "I'm sorry if I'm not the wife you pictured for your son, but I would have loved him without needing anything from you." That was the difference. Blair looked away. Carter stepped back. That's when Jackson walked forward again and said the one sentence that shattered what was left of their delusion. "You didn't lose Emily because she wasn't enough. You lost her because none of you were ever enough for her." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I held them back. Not because I wasn't broken, but because I was done breaking for people who didn't know how to hold something precious when it was placed in their hands. Would you have stayed silent to protect love, even when it cost you your dignity? Because the next choice I made would burn every bridge and light a new path I never saw coming. Stay with me. This isn't over yet. I left the Whitmore estate that night without looking back. The gravel crunched beneath my heels as I walked toward the waiting SUV, the cold wind slicing through the silk of my dress. But for the first time all evening, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like an outsider clawing to fit in. I felt weightless, hollow in the chest. Yes, but weightless. I slid into the car, and Jackson didn't say a word. He simply reached over and took my hand, the way he used to when I was a kid terrified of thunderstorms. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was a space where truth could breathe. We drove for miles before I finally whispered, "I loved him, Jack. I really did." He didn't tell me I shouldn't have. He didn't tell me Carter didn't deserve it. He just nodded. "That's what makes you better than them." I spent the next few days in my apartment, unplugged from everything. No phone, no news, no Carter. My inbox filled with missed calls, voicemails, apologies I didn't play. Evelyn sent flowers. Blair sent a half-hearted email that began with, "I'm sorry if," and ended with a promotional link to her charity's gala. Even Carter showed up outside my building once, stood on the sidewalk in the rain holding something wrapped in tissue paper. I watched him from my window and didn't move. I couldn't. Loving someone doesn't always mean you let them back in. Then one morning, I returned the ring. No letter, no explanation, just a velvet box sent by courier, sealed with the quiet kind of finality that says, "This chapter is over. The world moved on quickly." That's the funny thing about scandal. It echoes longer inside you than it does in headlines. The Whitmores would survive. Their circle would forgive. They always did when the people in question were rich enough. But me, I had something they would never understand. Freedom that didn't come from money. It came from choosing my dignity over their approval. Weeks passed, then months. I poured myself back into teaching, into morning chalk dust and the sound of sneakers on hallway floors. My students didn't care that my name had been whispered across Manhattan's social scene. They cared that I remembered who forgot their reading log and who needed extra time on fractions. That was the real world, the one where I belonged, the one I chose. And then came Noah. He was new at the school, transferred from a district in Boston, quiet, funny in that dry, blink and you'll miss it way. We first bonded over copier paper, both of us staring at the jammed machine like it had personally betrayed us. He offered me his last sticky note with a doodle of a robot holding a sign that said, "I tried." I laughed for the first time in a long time, and something shifted. Not dramatically, not like fireworks, more like a door slowly opening to fresh air. We talked, we shared lunch, we swapped stories about lesson plans and the weird things kids say when they think you're not listening. But what struck me wasn't what he did. It was what he didn't do. He didn't ask about my past, didn't treat me like I was broken or impressive. He didn't Google my last name. He just saw me. 6 months later, I invited him to dinner at Jackson's place. I warned him. My brother's intense. He's also a billionaire, so yeah. Noah blinked. Does he like wine or beer? Just like that, the anxiety melted. Dinner was warm and loud and messy in the best way. Jackson grilled too much food. Noah complimented his playlist. They talked about tech and public education and how both were underappreciated. There were no veiled questions, no assessments of pedigree. Just people who respected each other because of who they were, not what they were. Later that night, Noah and I sat on my fire escape with 2 mugs of hot cocoa and a shared blanket. The city below buzzed like it always had, but I felt still. You're different, he said softly, like you've been somewhere and come back stronger. I looked at him. I've been somewhere I never should have stayed, and I didn't come back stronger. I came back clearer. He nodded, like he understood something deeper than words. I'm glad you came back at all. I didn't reply. I just rested my head on his shoulder and let the quiet hold us. Carter sent me a letter once, a real one, handwritten. It came on creamy stationery with a return address in Connecticut. He wrote that he was sorry, that he'd learned more from that night than he ever had in all his Ivy League courses, that he was trying to be better, not for me, but because of me. I folded the letter and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath a stack of math worksheets and old report cards. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was closure. Sometimes people leave. Sometimes you leave them. But every once in a while you find someone who arrives, not to fix you, not to prove anything, but simply to stand beside you while you put yourself back together. And that's what Noah did. So no, I didn't marry Carter Whitmore and inherit a seat at someone else's table. I built my own, and when I sit at it now with student cell crayon drawings taped to the wall and the smell of burnt coffee in the air, I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Comment 100 if this story moved you. Where in the world are you watching from? Share this story with a friend who needs it today. Thank you for watching Life Stories.